The farmers laughed the morning Earl Whitaker started draining the old pond behind his barn. By noon, half of Harlan County had heard about it. A 71-year-old farmer with a bad knee, a leaking barn roof, and 14 days before the bank auctioned off the back 80, had rented a diesel pump and was pulling water out of a pond everyone else considered worthless. At Miller's Feed and Seed, the jokes came fast. Maybe Earl's looking for gold. Another man laughed. Only thing under that pond is mud, turtles, and old beer bottles. Then Calvin Mercer set his coffee down and smiled. Calvin owned the biggest farm equipment dealership in the county. He sold new tractors, new balers, new financing plans, and the kind of confidence that made poor farmers feel smaller when they walked into his showroom. "If Earl thinks that pond is going to pay his banknote," Calvin said, "then the old man has finally lost it." The room laughed. Only Harvey Olson stayed quiet. He was 86 years old, and he had known Earl's father, Samuel Whitaker, better than anyone still alive. Instead of laughing, Harvey looked toward the window and asked, "Did Earl say Samuel told him to drain it?" Nobody answered. They were too busy making jokes. 8 miles away, Earl tightened another clamp on the discharge hose. The diesel pump rattled beside the pond, shaking like an old tractor under too much load. Brown water rushed through the hose and spilled into the roadside ditch. Every gallon cost him fuel. Every hour cost him money. And every minute reminded him that the bank was not waiting. Emma, his granddaughter, stood by the fence with Samuel's old notebook in her hands. "You really think something is down there?" she asked. Earl looked across the dark water. "I think your great-grandfather wanted me to look." "That's not the same thing." "No," Earl said, "it isn't." He took the notebook from her and opened it to the folded page. Most of Samuel Whitaker's notebook was ordinary farm record-keeping: rainfall, calving dates, fuel purchases, parts numbers, seed costs. But near the back was a rough sketch of the pond. 3 cottonwoods along the western bank, an X between the second and third tree, and beneath it 12 words in Samuel's careful handwriting. "If the land is ever in danger, drain the pond. West Bank." Emma looked at the page again. "That's all?" Earl nodded. "That's all." "Then why believe it?" Earl folded the notebook. "Because my father never wrote down anything he wasn't willing to bet his farm on." By late afternoon, the pond had dropped just enough to expose a black ring of mud along the western bank. Nothing unusual appeared. Just cattail roots, a rusted fence post, and half of an old steel drum. The watchers along the gravel road laughed harder. Calvin Mercer drove in just before sunset. He stepped out of his clean black pickup wearing boots that looked like they had never touched manure, grease, or real mud. "You're really going through with this," he said. Earl checked the pump. "I am." Calvin unfolded a survey map across the hood of his truck. "I'll make you one last offer for the back 80. "No, you haven't heard the number." "I don't need to." Calvin pointed toward the pond. "You've got 14 days. The bank won't wait for an old story." Earl looked at the water running into the ditch. "My father never told stories." Calvin laughed once. "Stories don't pay banknotes." He folded the map, got back in his truck, and drove away. That night, Earl sat at the kitchen table with the bank letter beside Samuel's notebook. Emma poured coffee he did not drink. "What if there's nothing?" she asked softly. Earl did not answer right away. Outside, the diesel pump kept rumbling in the dark. Finally he said, "Then I'll have made a fool of myself in front of the whole county." Emma looked at the bank letter. "And the farm?" Earl stared at his own reflection in the kitchen window. "If there's nothing down there," he said, "then I don't know how to save it." The next morning, the crowd was bigger. Men leaned against fence posts with coffee cups in their hands. 2 boys sat on a pickup tailgate. Someone from the local paper slowed down long enough to take a photograph. The pump clogged twice before noon. Each time someone laughed. Each time Earl cleaned the intake screen and started it again. By the 4th morning, only a shallow pool remained near the center of the pond. The west bank was exposed. Emma unfolded Samuel's sketch. and lined up the 3 cottonwoods. The X is almost dry. Earl looked toward the equipment shed. Call Dale. Dale Sorensen arrived with the only backhoe within 20 miles that could reach into the pond bed without sinking itself. He climbed down, studied the black mud, and looked at Earl. "You sure about this?" Earl said no. Dale smiled. "That's the most honest thing I've heard all week." The first bucket brought up mud. The second, roots. The third, half a tire. The men on the bank laughed. Calvin, who had returned to watch, folded his arms. "I've got $50, says the next scoop is another tire." Dale lowered the bucket near the second cottonwood. The teeth disappeared into the mud. For a moment, there was only the wet, sucking sound of clay. Then, clang. Not stone, not a root. Metal. Heavy metal. Dale froze. The crowd stopped laughing. He lifted the bucket slightly, then lowered it again. Clang. This time the sound rolled across the empty pond like a bell. Earl stepped into the mud. "Easy," he said. Dale scraped layer by layer. Black clay slid away. Then something red appeared. Not bright red. Old machinery red. Faded, scarred, and buried for nearly 40 years. Someone on the bank whispered, "That's tractor paint." Earl knelt and wiped mud away with both hands. Raised letters slowly appeared beneath his fingers. I, then H. International Harvester. For the first time since the pump had started, the whole county went quiet. Dale shut off the backhoe. The silence was bigger than the machine had been. Earl and Dale cleared the mud by hand after that. Emma climbed down with a garden trowel. Harvey Olson followed with an old flat spade. Nobody asked Harvey to help. He simply did. The shape emerged slowly. It was not a whole tractor. That would have been too much. What came out of the mud was stranger and more believable. A heavy red engine block, part of a bell housing, 2 broken frame rails, and mud packed into every opening. It would never run. Any man who knew machinery could see that. The cylinders were full of clay. The water jacket was packed. The block carried a rust stain down one side that looked like an old wound. Calvin was the first to speak. "Well," he said, forcing a laugh, Earl found himself a boat anchor. A few men chuckled, but not many, because the block had appeared exactly where Samuel's notebook said it would. Walter Briggs arrived before they pulled it out. He was 82 years old, thin as a fence post, and had rebuilt more Farmall, Case, Oliver, and Massey engines than Calvin Mercer had ever sold new tractors. Walter climbed into the pond, knelt beside the block, and wiped mud from the casting pad. Then he stopped. "Don't move it yet." Calvin crossed his arms. "It's scrap." Walter didn't look at him. Maybe. He wiped another layer of mud away. Maybe not. Emma returned with warm water. Walter laid a wet rag across the casting pad and waited. Then he cleaned the raised letters slowly, using only his thumbnail and a soft cloth. First came an F, then 20, then X. Walter's face changed. Earl saw it. "What is it?" Walter did not answer. He cleaned another mark, a dash, then what looked like a 3, F20X-3. Walter sat back on his heels. "That shouldn't be here." Calvin stepped closer. "What shouldn't?" Walter pointed to the number. "This isn't a normal production casting." Calvin laughed. "International made thousands of red engines." Walter finally looked up. "They made thousands, but not with that number." The crowd shifted. Nobody understood what the number meant, but everyone understood Walter's voice. Then Emma saw something tied to one mounting ear with corroded wire. At first it looked like a flat rock. Dale scraped it gently. Brass appeared beneath black clay, a small brass tag, bent, darkened, but still attached. Walter's expression hardened. "That's enough." Earl looked at him. "Enough? Don't clean another inch." "Why?" Walter looked at the engine block, then at Samuel's notebook in Earl's pocket. "Because every mark on this thing is evidence now." Calvin laughed again, but it sounded thinner. "Evidence of what?" Walter stood slowly. "I don't know yet." Then he looked at Earl. "But I know who might." The block was lifted from the pond with chains and set on oak skids inside Earl's barn. Mud poured from it in black clumps. The smell of old pond water filled the room. By sundown, half the county had come by to look. Most expected the story to end there. Old man drains pond, finds ruined engine. Everybody goes home. But that night, Earl could not sleep. He walked back to the barn after midnight and stood under a single work light, staring at the block. For the first time since the pump started, he let himself say what he had been hiding. "Dad," he whispered, "I hope I didn't drain that pond for nothing." A voice answered from the doorway. "You didn't?" Earl turned. Harvey Olson stood there with his hat in his hands. "I should have told you sooner," Harvey said. Earl pulled up a chair. Harvey sat down slowly and looked at the red block for a long time. "I was 17 when the truck came," he said. Blue letters on the door. Men from Chicago. They argued with Samuel behind that barn. Earl's throat tightened. "What about?" "I don't know all of it, but I know this. That engine didn't come from a dealer lot. It came in a crate. Your father and 2 men from Lincoln mounted it in a test chassis after harvest. I saw it pull. Hard plowing, belt work, drawbar trials." Earl looked at the block. "Why didn't he tell me?" Harvey's eyes stayed on the old red iron. "Because something went wrong." "With the engine?" "No," Harvey said. "With the men." He leaned forward. "They came back wanting everything returned. Said the trial had been cancelled. Said no payment was owed. Your father said a promise was a promise." Harvey paused. "I remember Samuel came home one night with his shirt torn and blood on his knuckles. A week later, he told everyone to stay away from the west side of that pond." Earl said nothing. Harvey stood and put his hat back on. "If I were you, I'd call Walter Briggs before Calvin Mercer touches that block. Walter's already seen it. Then ask Walter who knows more than he does." The next morning, Walter returned with kerosene, cotton cloth, an old camera, and a name written on a torn piece of paper. "Russell Keene, Iowa," Walter said. "Collector, harvester trial parts, factory memos, old service records. If anyone still knows what F20X means, it's him." Earl looked toward the bank letter on the workbench. "How fast can he come?" Walter understood. "How long do you have?" 11 days. Walter folded the paper into Earl's hand. "Then we'd better hope he answers." Russell Keene arrived the next afternoon in a faded brown station wagon with Iowa plates, 2 cardboard boxes in the back seat, and the tired look of a man who had spent too many years chasing stories that turned out to be scrap. He did not look like the kind of man who could save a farm. He looked like a retired school teacher who had been living out of dusty archives. Thin arms, old boots, canvas cap, a red International harvester patch so faded it was almost pink. But Walter Briggs met him at the barn door like he was greeting a judge. "Russell, Walter." They shook hands once. No small talk. Russell looked past him at the engine block, sitting under the barn light. Then he looked at Earl. "You moved it. Only from the pond to here. Washed? No. Pressure cleaned? No. Wire brushed." Walter cut in. "I told him not to ruin it." Russell nodded. "Good." He set down his boxes, circled the block twice, then crouched near the casting pad Walter had uncovered. F20X-3. Russell studied it for a long time. His face gave away nothing. Calvin Mercer appeared at the barn door before anyone invited him. "I heard the expert came." Russell did not turn around. "I'm not an expert." Calvin smiled. "That's not comforting." Russell finally looked at him. "Experts tell you what they know too quickly. Collectors survive by knowing what they don't." Walter nearly smiled. Calvin did not. Russell opened one of his boxes and pulled out copied service notes, old factory bulletins, photographs of castings, and handwritten lists no one else in the barn could read. Emma stood beside Earl with a notebook. Harvey sat near the door, quiet as a fence post. Russell compared the casting mark against sheet after sheet. Then he sat back and said the words nobody wanted to hear. "I'm not convinced." Earl felt his stomach drop. Calvin's smile returned. Walter frowned. You drove 5 hours to say that? Russell nodded. Yes. Why? Because 5 hours is cheaper than letting an old farmer bet his land on a story I can't prove. The barn went quiet. Russell looked at Earl. Mr. Whitaker, this casting is unusual. The brass tag is unusual. The circumstances are unusual. But unusual is not value. Earl swallowed. What would prove it? Russell pointed to the brass tag. That might. Then to Samuel's notebook. That might. Then to the block. That might. But not separately. I need a connection between the metal, the tag, your father's note, and an outside record. Something that did not come from this family. Calvin chuckled. So he needs a miracle. Russell looked at him calmly. No. Paperwork. Walter brought warm water, alcohol, cotton swabs, and a patience most men only learn after breaking expensive things. For nearly an hour, Russell cleaned the brass tag grain by grain. No one spoke above a whisper. First, one stamped letter appeared. Then a dash. Then a 3. Russell stopped. His breathing changed. Walter saw it. So did Earl. So did Calvin. Russell angled the light lower. Near the bottom edge of the tag, under a line of black clay, a tiny diamond shape appeared. Inside it were 2 letters, EC. Russell stood so fast his knee cracked. Walter leaned closer. What is it? Russell pulled a photocopied memo from his folder and laid it beside the tag. At the bottom of the memo was the same diamond mark, engineering casting. Russell stared at it. Then he said, this tag came from an evaluation component. Emma covered her mouth. Walter whispered, I knew it. Earl closed his eyes. Calvin stepped forward. Evaluation means what, exactly? Russell still looked at the tag. It means this was not a normal production part. Does it mean it's worth $40,000? Russell turned. No, Calvin smiled. There it is. Russell continued. It means it is worth investigating. Calvin laughed. That's a long way from saving a farm. And for once, nobody could argue, because he was right. Earl had 11 days. A maybe would not stop the bank. Russell asked to see every paper Samuel had left behind. Earl brought the metal box from the farmhouse, the notebook, an old freight receipt, a faded photograph, and a folded letter with brown creases. Russell handled them like evidence. He checked the handwriting, the ink, the dates, the freight route, Chicago to Lincoln, Lincoln to Alma. And the photograph showed Samuel Whitaker in 1949 beside a stripped red test chassis near the same barn. The hood was off. 2 men in coats stood beside it. One held a clipboard. On the back, Samuel had written one sentence. They came for the machine, not the truth. Russell read it twice. Then he looked at Earl. Your father believed someone tried to erase the trial. Calvin scoffed. Or he was angry and wrote a dramatic sentence. Walter turned on him. Why are you still here? Calvin folded his arms. Because if Earl starts telling people he has a fortune in the barn and it turns out to be scrap, somebody should be here to say so. Emma looked at him. You mean if it turns out to be valuable, you want to know first? Calvin's jaw tightened. Russell closed the folder. I'll call 2 archives tonight, Wisconsin and Illinois. Maybe a retired harvester man in Moline. He looked at Earl. But I need to be honest. These things usually take months. Earl's hand tightened on the workbench. I have 11 days. I know. Calvin took 1 step closer. Earl, I'll make this simple. $5,000 for the block. Cashier's check. Today. The barn went silent. Walter stared at him. Yesterday you called it scrap. Calvin shrugged. Yesterday I was joking. Emma said, this morning you were laughing. Calvin ignored her. 5,000 won't save the farm, but it buys time. Earl looked at the block, at the brass tag, at the photograph of his father. For one terrible moment, he understood how men sold things they believed in, not because they stopped believing, because pressure made relief look like wisdom. Walter spoke quietly. He offered $20 before he saw the tag. Russell looked at Calvin. 20. Then 500 after the casting mark, Walter said. Russell's voice turned cold. And now 5,000 after the engineering mark. Calvin said nothing. Russell turned to Earl. Don't sell it to him. Calvin's face hardened. That your professional opinion? No, Russell said. That's my moral one. Calvin left angry. But before stepping into his truck, he turned back. The bank doesn't care about moral opinions. Then he drove away. That night, Russell used Earl's kitchen phone until nearly midnight. He called collectors, retired mechanics, a small machinery archive in Madison, a former partsman in Moline. Most gave him nothing. One remembered post-war evaluation castings. Another remembered that some regional files had been boxed when an office closed. Nothing solid. Nothing that would stop an auction. Earl sat at the kitchen table, Samuel's notebook open in front of him. Emma made coffee. Walter dozed in a chair. Harvey sat by the window, listening. Around 11:40, Harvey suddenly said, "Midland." Russell stopped with the phone in his hand. "What?" "The truck," Harvey said. "The one that came to Samuel's barn. Blue letters on the door. Midland Implement Transport." Russell's eyes sharpened. "Are you sure?" Harvey nodded slowly. "I was 17, not blind." Russell grabbed the freight receipt. His finger moved across the faded print, then stopped. "Carrier Midland Implement Transport." For the first time all night, Russell looked awake. "This matters." Earl leaned forward. "Why?" "If the carrier on the receipt matches a living witness, and if the archive has any field report tied to Midland shipments, then we may have an outside connection." He stopped himself. He didn't want to give Earl hope too soon, but hope was already in the room. At 12:16 a.m., Russell reached a woman named Marjorie Bell, a volunteer archivist in Madison, who knew old agricultural records better than most paid historians. He explained the code, the tag, the pond, the receipt, the name Samuel Whitaker, Alma, Nebraska. Then he waited. Earl watched his face. Walter woke up. Emma stopped breathing. Finally, Russell said, "Tomorrow morning?" Another pause. "Please. Anything marked F20X, Engineering Casting, Nebraska District, or Midland Implement Transport." He hung up. Nobody spoke. Then Russell said, "She thinks there may be uncatalogued boxes from the Chicago regional office." Earl looked at him. "Thinks?" Russell nodded. "Thinks." It was not proof. But it was more than they had that morning. The next day, the story changed in town. Men were no longer laughing about the pond. They were arguing about whether Calvin had tried to buy the block too cheaply. Some said Earl had found a fortune. Others said he was setting himself up for an even bigger embarrassment. Calvin made sure of that. By noon, everyone at Miller's Feed and Seed had heard his new version. Earl Whitaker had a rusted engine, a dead man's note, and no appraisal. By 2, the bank had heard it too. Dale Hargrove arrived at the farm with Calvin in the passenger seat. That alone told Earl everything. Hargrove stood in the barn doorway, avoiding the mud on the floor. "Mr. Whitaker, I understand there may be questions regarding the value of this item." Earl looked at Calvin. "Questions from who?" Calvin smiled. "From reality." Russell stepped forward. "The component has an engineering casting tag and matching freight evidence." "We're waiting on archive confirmation." Hargrove adjusted his glasses. "But no written appraisal." "Not yet." "No certified authentication." "Not yet." "No purchase offer." "No." The banker looked at Earl. "Then from the bank's perspective, it has no recognized value." "No recognized value." The words hurt more than Calvin's jokes. Earl nodded slowly. "How long?" 8 days. Calvin folded his arms. 8 days to turn pond mud into money. Earl looked at him. "No." Calvin smiled. "No." 8 days for the truth to catch up. For once, Calvin had no answer, but the bank did. Hargrove gave Earl a final notice and left. That evening, Earl walked the West 80 alone. He passed the old pond, now mostly mud. He passed the hay ground his father had once lost and bought back. At the far fence line, He looked toward Calvin's dealership lights glowing beyond town. For the first time, he imagined Mercer signs on his land. Future equipment yard, no trespassing. He took Samuel's notebook from his pocket. The sketch was still there. The X between the cottonwoods, the words beneath it. If the land is ever in danger, drain the pond. Earl looked toward the barn, where the red block waited. "Dad," he whispered, "I need more than a maybe." The land gave no answer, but the phone rang before sunrise. Emma answered it first, then shouted for Russell. He nearly stumbled down the stairs from the spare room. "This is Keene." He listened. No one in the kitchen moved. Then he grabbed a pencil and began writing on the back of an envelope. Regional Field Evaluation Summary, October 1949, Nebraska District. Unit Component, F20X-3. Field Operator, S. Whitaker, Alma, Nebraska. Earl gripped the table. Russell looked up. His face had changed. Not excitement, proof. "They found it," he said. Walter removed his hat. Harvey closed his eyes. Emma began crying before she knew she was. Russell spoke carefully into the phone. "Marjorie, can you send a copy?" He listened, then frowned. "The fax machine in town. Miller's Feed and Seed." Another pause. "Yes, send it there." He hung up and turned to Earl. "The archive has a field report. It connects the casting number to Samuel." Earl sat down slowly. For nearly 40 years, his father had been a story, a memory, a stubborn dead man with a notebook nobody understood. Now Samuel Whitaker's name existed on paper outside the family, outside the county, outside laughter. Russell put a hand on the envelope. "This still isn't the final step." Earl looked up. "What is?" Russell glanced toward town. "The whole county is going to have to see it." Emma frowned. "Why?" "Because Calvin is already trying to call it fake. If this stays in your barn, he'll keep the story muddy." Walter looked toward the fairgrounds beyond town. "The county fair opens in 5 days." Russell nodded. "Then that's where we take it." Earl stared at him. "You want me to put my father's engine block in front of the same men who laughed at me?" Walter answered before Russell could. "Yes?" Earl looked at the old mechanic. Walter's voice was quiet. "Because that's where they need to stop." By sunrise, the story had escaped the Whitaker farm. It was no longer just about an old man draining a pond. Now people in town were saying different words. Engineering casting, field report, Samuel Whitaker, F20X-3. At Miller's Feed and Seed, the same men who had laughed into their coffee now leaned over the counter and spoke like they had always suspected there was something under that water. That was how small towns worked. A man could be a fool on Monday and a legend by Friday, and half the county would pretend they had never changed sides. Earl did not go into town to hear it. He had 5 days left before the bank auction. The only thing that mattered now was proof strong enough to turn old iron into money before Calvin Mercer turned the West 80 into a dealership lot. The fax from Madison came through at Miller's just after 10. Russell, Walter, Earl, Emma, and Harvey drove into town in Earl's old Ford, with Russell's station wagon behind them. When they stepped inside the feed store, the room went quiet. Bill Miller stood behind the counter, holding 3 warm fax pages. Calvin Mercer stood near the coffee pot. So did Dale Hargrove from the bank. Of course they did. Bill looked at Earl. "These came for you." Russell took the pages first. The fax was streaked and faded, but the heading was readable. Regional Field Evaluation Summary, October 1949, Nebraska District. Russell's finger moved slowly down the page. No one in the store breathed. Then he stopped. Unit Component, F20X-3 Evaluation Casting. Test Location, Alma, Nebraska. Field Operator, S. Whitaker. Drawbar Trial. Belt Load Test. Oil Gallery Inspection. Walter whispered, "There it is." Earl gripped the counter. For almost 40 years, Samuel Whitaker's name had existed only in memory, in a notebook, and in Harvey Olson's old story about men from Chicago. Now it was printed on a record that had not come from the Whitaker family. That changed everything. Or at least it should have. Dale Hargrove adjusted his glasses. "Mr. Keene, does this establish monetary value?" Russell looked at him. "It establishes historical connection." "That wasn't my question." "No," Russell said, "but it is the first question that matters." Calvin smiled faintly. "History doesn't pay banknotes." Earl turned to him. "You keep saying that like you're afraid it might." The feed store went silent again. Russell folded the fax pages carefully. "I can write a preliminary authentication letter today. It will state that the component appears to be a documented engineering evaluation, casting connected to Samuel Whitaker by archival record." Hargrove nodded. "Preliminary. Yes. Not a certified appraisal. Not yet. So from the bank's standpoint, we still do not have liquid funds." Earl already knew the answer, but he asked anyway. "How much to stop the auction?" Hargrove hesitated. $41,800 by close of business, July 28. The number sat in the room like a weight. Calvin looked around as if inviting everyone to witness reality. Russell slid the fax pages into his folder. "Then we need buyers." Calvin gave a short laugh. "In 5 days?" Russell looked at him. "If the right people see it." Walter turned toward Earl. "The fair." Emma understood first. "The Harlan County Fair opens Friday." Walter nodded. "Every old machinery man within 50 miles will be there." Russell frowned. "I don't like turning authentication into a public show." Harvey, who had been quiet near the door, finally spoke. "It was laughed at in public." He looked at Earl. "Let it be proven in public." No one argued after that. By evening, the plan was set. The engine block would go to the antique machinery tent at the county fair. Russell would bring the faxed field report, the photograph, the freight receipt, and Samuel's notebook. Walter would help move the block without damaging the cracked housing. Emma would type a clean label for the display. Harvey would sign a witness statement about the truck from Chicago and the pond being closed afterward. And Earl would stand beside the thing his father had hidden, while the whole county decided whether to keep laughing. But Calvin had already made his own plan. The fair board chairman called Earl just after supper. "Earl," Leonard Pike said carefully, "Calvin says there may be a dispute about authenticity." Earl closed his eyes. "Did he?" "He thinks the fair shouldn't be used to promote something that hasn't been officially certified." "It won't be promoted. What do you call it?" Earl looked through the kitchen window toward the barn. "The truth." There was a long silence. Leonard sighed. "Bring it Friday morning. 1 table. Antique machinery tent. No auction on fairgrounds." "Thank you." "And Earl?" "Yes?" "Bring every paper you've got. Calvin's bringing men of his own." Earl hung up slowly. Emma looked at him. "What did he say?" Earl folded his hands. "He said Calvin's bringing an audience." Walter, standing in the doorway, smiled. "Good." Earl looked at him. "Good?" Walter nodded toward the barn. "Truth doesn't mind an audience." The next 4 days moved fast. Dale Sorensen built a wooden cradle for the engine block so the cracked bell housing would not carry the weight. Walter wrapped the brass tag in cloth and cardboard. Russell worked on the authentication letter. Emma typed the display card on an old typewriter. International Harvester Engineering Evaluation Casting. F20X-3. Recovered from Whitaker Pond. Field tested by Samuel Whitaker, 1949. Earl watched her type his father's name and had to walk outside, not because he was ashamed, because for the first time in years, Samuel Whitaker felt less like a memory and more like a man about to be heard. Meanwhile, Calvin placed an ad in the county paper. Future home of Mercer Equipment West Yard. Pending acquisition. Under it was a map. Earl's West 80 was shaded in gray. Emma slammed the paper onto the kitchen table. "He's trying to scare you." Earl read the ad once, then folded it neatly. "No." He looked toward town. "He's trying to bury the story before we can dig it up." Friday morning came hot and bright. 2 days before the bank deadline, Dale arrived before sunrise with the flatbed. The block was lifted slowly from the barn floor and secured in its cradle. For a moment, Earl remembered the sound it had made when the backhoe first struck it. Clang, the sound that stopped the laughter. Now it sat on the flatbed under canvas straps, its number protected, its tag covered, its papers boxed. As they pulled onto the gravel road, 3 pickups followed, then 5, then more. By the time they reached the fairgrounds, it looked less like a delivery and more like a procession. The Harlan County Fair was already waking up. Stock trailers backed toward the barns. Children carried feed buckets. A generator coughed near the midway. The antique machinery tent stood near the tractor pull track, where old farmalls, olivers, and cases were lined up in the morning dust. Calvin Mercer was already there. He stood with 3 men Earl did not know. One had a clipboard. One wore a blazer despite the heat. One had the amused face of a man who enjoyed proving other people wrong. Calvin smiled when Earl climbed out of the truck. "You made it." Earl looked at him. "So did you." Calvin nodded toward the flatbed. "I hope you brought more than mud and memories." Russell stepped down, holding the folder. He did. The block was unloaded beneath the tent. At first, people came out of curiosity. Then they stayed. Men leaned close to read the casting number. Women asked Emma about the pond. Children wanted to know why the engine was broken. Emma answered the same way every time. "It isn't valuable because it runs. It's valuable because it proves something happened." By 10 o'clock, the crowd was 3 rows deep. By 11, Leonard Pike climbed onto a small wooden platform and tapped the microphone. The speaker squealed. People turned. Calvin stood in the front row. So did the banker. Russell stepped to the microphone with the folder in both hands. He did not look like a man who enjoyed speaking to crowds. He looked like a man who would rather spend the day alone with old paper, but he began anyway. "This engine block is not being presented today as a running engine. It will never be a running engine. It spent decades in pond mud, and any claim otherwise would be foolish." Several older men nodded. Russell pointed to the block. "What matters is not whether it runs. What matters is what it is." He held up the first photograph. Casting code F20X3. Then another. Engineering diamond mark on the brass tag. Then the faxed report. Regional Field Evaluation Summary. October 1949. Nebraska District. Test location, Alma, Nebraska. Field operator, S. Whitaker. The crowd grew quiet. Russell's voice strengthened. "Those records establish that this component was connected to an International Harvester Engineering Evaluation trial, and that Samuel Whitaker operated it in field conditions here in Harlan County." For one long moment, nobody spoke. Then the man with the clipboard raised his hand. "Preliminary, correct?" Russell's jaw tightened. "Yes, preliminary. So not final. No. And without final certification, no museum can responsibly assign full market value." Russell said nothing for a second, then answered, "Not full market value, no." Calvin stepped forward, just enough for everyone to see him. "Then maybe we ought to be careful before turning pond scrap into a legend." There it was. The strike Calvin had been waiting to make. Public, clean, timed perfectly. A few men murmured. Earl felt Emma move closer beside him. The old fear returned for 1 second. Maybe it would still fall apart. Maybe the county would laugh twice. Then a woman's voice came from the back of the tent. Russell Keene was always too cautious. Heads turned. An older woman stepped through the crowd carrying a leather document tube. Russell stared. "Marjorie?" She reached the platform, breathing hard but smiling. "I didn't trust the facts." She handed him the tube. "So I brought the original file copy." The crowd went silent. Russell opened the tube. Inside was a yellowed carbon copy, a clearer photograph, and a second page no one had seen yet. He read it once, then again. Calvin's smile disappeared. Russell looked at Earl, then at the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice changed. "This addendum identifies the tested casting by number, records the unit as retained, pending a payment dispute, and lists Samuel Whitaker as the farm operator who completed the final drawbar and belt load trials." Walter whispered, "Say the number." Russell did. F20X-3. Marjorie adjusted her glasses. And if I may add, the archive contains only 3 references to E-series evaluation castings sent into farm service. 2 were returned and scrapped. She looked at the engine block. This appears to be the only surviving example currently known with field papers. No one laughed. No one whispered. No one moved. For once, the whole county had nothing to say. Then Harvey Olson stepped forward. He removed his hat. I saw the men come for it in 1949, he said. I saw Samuel Whitaker stand his ground. I didn't understand it then. He looked at Earl. I do now. The silence broke slowly, not with cheers, with clapping, one pair of hands, then another, then another. It was not loud at first. It was heavier than that. It sounded like respect, returning one man at a time. Earl looked down. Emma cried openly. Walter wiped his eyes and pretended it was sweat. Calvin Mercer stood in the front row with nothing left to say. By the end of the day, 2 collectors had made written offers, one for $65,000, one for $80,000. Then the Midwest Farm Machinery Heritage Foundation asked for 48 hours to assemble a preservation agreement. The bank suspended the auction the next morning, not because it had grown sentimental, because recognized value had finally arrived. 2 days later, the foundation offered $138,000 for preservation rights, public display rights, and a 10-year exhibition agreement, while ownership of the casting and original family papers remained with the Whitaker family. Russell read the terms twice. Walter read them once and said he hated lawyers but liked the number. Emma checked the payoff amount. Earl signed at the kitchen table. His hand shook, not from age, from the weight leaving it. That afternoon he drove to Midwest Agricultural Bank and paid the note in full. Dale Hargrove stamped the paper. Paid. The sound was small, but to Earl it was louder than the backhoe striking iron. Calvin came to the farm 1 week later. Earl was repairing fence near the west pasture when the black pickup stopped at the gate. For a long moment, Calvin stayed inside. Then he stepped out. No map, no offer, no coffee from town, just a man with less certainty than he used to carry. I heard the bank released the lien. Earl tightened a strand of wire. They did. Calvin looked toward the old pond, then the barn, then the land he had almost owned. I didn't know your father had done all that. Earl kept working. No. Calvin swallowed. I suppose I should have asked before I laughed. Earl stopped and looked at him. The anger was still there somewhere, but it no longer needed to be used. That would have been cheaper, Earl said. Calvin nodded once. He turned to leave, then stopped. For what it's worth. Earl waited. Calvin looked at the West 80. I was wrong. Earl said nothing. Calvin got back into his truck and drove away. There was no shouting, no revenge speech, no crowd watching Calvin get humiliated. That was not Earl's way, and it had not been Samuel's way either. The revenge was quieter. It was the auction notice taken down, the banknote stamped paid, the barn roof repaired before fall rain, the cattle grazing on land still bearing the Whitaker name, and an old red engine block displayed under museum lights with one small sign beside it, recovered from Whitaker Pond, field tested by Samuel Whitaker, preserved by his son Earl. Years later, people in Harlan County still talked about the summer Earl drained the pond. Some remembered laughing. Most pretended they had not laughed as loud as they did. The pond was never filled again. Earl turned the low ground into pasture and planted young cottonwoods along the west bank. Every spring, after a hard rain, water gathered there for a day or two, just enough to reflect the sky, just enough to remind anyone looking that the ground had once hidden a secret. And when Emma's son asked her if what Earl found was treasure, she looked toward the barn, the pasture, and the land that was still in the family, because one old farmer trusted a dead man's note when the whole county laughed. Yes, she said, but not the kind people dig for. The boy frowned. What kind then? Emma smiled. The kind that only looks valuable after you learn the story. That became the part people remembered most. Not the money, not the museum, not even Calvin Mercer standing silent at the fair. They remembered the old farmer who drained a pond while everyone laughed. They remembered the broken red iron rising from the mud, and they remembered that sometimes the world is too quick to call a thing useless simply because it has stopped making noise. But silence is not the same as worthlessness. Rust is not the same as ruin. Mud is not the same as burial. And an old promise is not dead just because proud men forgot it. Sometimes it only waits, under water, under dirt, under laughter, until the right hands bring it back into the light.